for joining with us for the part 2 of the episode 5 of Satahana, the pandemic and its impact on the arena of international business, with Dr. Sajid Dishankar, Department Head and Senior Lecturer attached to the Department of International Business. So, moving on to our next question. During the starting period of January, many foreign investors visited Sri Lanka to analyze investing here. How can we attract and retain these kinds of foreign direct investments to reduce the reliance on foreign debt, sir?
Yeah, actually, again, this is something, again, if I go back to my earlier points that I highlighted, Sri Lankan economy, we happen to rely on some foreign investments due to this lack of local investments. I think personally, I'm not against, I'm not an anti-liberalist, right? But I prefer more inward-oriented economic policies and economic activities, because that is what we are experiencing now. The openness has created a lot of problems for us. Like I said earlier, we call it the vulnerability. Economic vulnerability is high in Sri Lanka. So since we do not have that much of local investments, that is why we happen to rely on these kind of foreign investments, especially like, okay, we, in terms of these household savings, we call in general domestic savings, household savings, business savings, and public savings. That is the fiscal practice of the government or the government savings. When we are not having sufficiently those kind of savings, then we have to rely on these foreign investments for our investments. So generally, when, as far as an investor is concerned, when they are thinking of a certain location for an investment, they are thinking whether this economy is a safe location for their capital to be parked. Because why they sometimes do investment is, okay, for example, sometimes for the profitability, that is one thing. Some economies are there. They have excess capital. For example, if you take China, China has excess capital. So now they are in search of locations to park their capital. But the thing is, they will not, the investors, foreign investors will not simply choose a certain country to park their investment unless it is a safer place. So therefore, the question that we have to ask from ourselves is Sri Lanka is a safe place for these investments, for foreign investors? Now, in this practice, we need to look at the political economy of the country. I'm not saying that, okay, investments are incorporated with a certain risk. Risk factor is there always in an investment. We can't say that, okay, no one can do an investment or investment in a business without a risk, right? There is a risk factor always. But I'm not referring to that risk here. I'm referring to the risk in the political economy. This political economy is a broader perspective, right? Politics, economics, and this the behavioral side as well, the cultural perspective also included in this political economy concept. So therefore, they are looking at this the stability or the consistency of the political economy, whether the political system or the government is stable, and the macroeconomic stabilization is there without like kind of let's say the debtness, like I said earlier, and inflation, and if you take the labor market issues, right? So they are looking at all these things. So now, if you look at the economy of Sri Lanka, I think we have growth opportunities. That's true. We have more growth opportunities. But the thing is, have we created that kind of conducive environment or conducive political economy within the country? Now, usually there are two key reports published by two well-known organizations in the world. There are many reports, but I would highlight two things. One is a publication of the World Bank Group, and that is called the Doing Business Report. This Doing Business Report explains how easy to do business in a certain country. How easy to do business in a certain country. And according to the recent publication, they have ranked us at the 99th place out of 190 countries. I'm not saying that, okay, it's that bad, but if you take again the example Singapore. Singapore was the #1 in terms of doing business since 2006 to 2017. And 2017 onward, New Zealand topped in this ranking and Singapore is second. Now that is why I wanted to highlight that, okay, our position, 99th position. Singapore first and second. Now this is a fundamental requirement, ease of doing business. It covers different perspectives like registering businesses and acquiring, accessing these infrastructure facilities and getting into contracts, the ease of hiring and firing workers, right? So different perspectives are there, taken as criteria to rank the countries. So therefore, that is one thing. The other publication is the Global Competitiveness Report, published by this World Economic Forum. And recently, according to the recent publication or recent ranking, out of 141 countries, Sri Lanka ranked 84th position. There are mainly different perspectives, actually multidimensional perspectives are considered in this Global Competitiveness Report. It evaluates the competitiveness level of the country. It doesn't matter, it doesn't need the country to be a developed country. No, even a developing country can be competitive in terms of different perspectives. So therefore, I think even in that report, it highlights mainly if you take the labor market and our macroeconomic performance is quite poor. I think these are the areas of intervention that we need. If we can improve this level, if we can improve step by step with a certain gradual transition or a transformation, I think Sri Lanka would be a very attractive location for foreign investments.
So I feel Sri Lanka needs to pay attention to many areas in order to find a solution to this issue. So moving on to our next question, sir. What are the predictions or changes for the new normal in fields of economics and international trade or businesses in the context of Sri Lanka?
Right. Okay. So this is related to this ongoing pandemic thing. Yeah. So actually, in front of all the economies, there are two main issues. One thing is the battle against the pandemic. The other one is the battle against the possible economic crisis. So in this issue, I don't think that we can wait. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not referring just to Sri Lanka. Any economy cannot wait until you have this, okay, battle with this pandemic and eradicate it, and then go by these economic things. No, you can't do that thing. By that time, if you just go by this pandemic, by that time, okay, there would be a certain economic depression. So therefore, at the same time, you have to go by or face this battle against the economic crisis as well, possible economic crisis as well. Because the longer the period of the existence of the crisis, the greater the impact of that pandemic on the economy. So therefore, as a country, we need to think of both these perspectives. Now, at the moment, we experience a huge contraction in trade and investment activities around the world. So not just in Sri Lanka, not just in developing countries. Sometimes we can see that, okay, recent statistics prove that the impact of this, economic impact of this pandemic is very high in developed countries than in developing countries. So because of this reason, developed countries happen to adopt a certain passive uh, like, reactions to their international business activities. So this might limit the opportunities that we have. This might limit the opportunities that we have. So therefore, we have to think of an alternative. We have to think of an alternative or a different mechanism to cover this gap, fill this gap. So as a country, if I want a Sri Lankan context, as a country which considerably rely on international trade and investment, now we have to look at this one very carefully and responsibly. Like I said earlier, the dependent nature that we have here might create more impact in the future. So therefore, it is timely important for us to create a certain internal cushion. Like I said earlier, the internal cushion. That means we need to move towards some kind of inward-oriented practices. I'm not saying that again to have a kind of shock therapy transition and internalize or transform the whole political economy into an inward-oriented one. No, but a kind of a gradual movement. So therefore, in this new normal condition, mainly what we have to think of is to improve our level of independence, reduce our level of dependence. So there are actually, for this, we need to have two categories of policies. One is the short term and the other one is the long term. Because the short run, we can't respond because of like promoting businesses and promoting investments and localizing our investments and production takes time. So therefore, you need to go by some kind of short-term policies. It's kind of patchwork. We might have to do that thing. But at the same time, we need to target the long run with some supply side policies which are highly inward oriented. Because step by step, that is what we call the gradualism. Step by step, we need to think of this movement rather than waiting until this pandemic is over and relying again on these foreign markets, or until the foreign investors come into country, until they open their markets to our exports. They are also having some kind of, they have also implemented some kind of defending strategy. So therefore, you can't rely on that thing anymore. So that is why it's important for you to internalize your activities step by step.
These points are in fact so important for us as a country to take into account, sir. So moving on to our next questions. The government has implemented certain import restrictions to manage the balance of payment problems and to encourage local productions. So what do you think, sir, about the long-term impact of these restrictions?
Right, yes. I think I can extend that my early explanation in this question. Again, I would say that, yeah, that BOP problem, balance of payment issue is a kind of another critical problem that we have. We have the current account problem, importantly, the trade account issue, trade deficit, and the other one is the capital account issue. So if I again attend to this, the trade account or imports, we have been creating these kind of trade deficits throughout. Actually, it was quite favorable in the recent past, due to this pandemic, due to these imports restrictions that the government imposed. It's a good move because it's a timely, important move. I think that is what we need to think of, like I said earlier. We have to have, again, I'm not saying again, to go by a certain import substitution strategy. It needs not to be a certain very wide import substitution, but I think we can just think of possible substitutions. Like, for example, just think of a person's or a household's daily consumption. Now just think how much of value or how much of your consumption or how much of that value is added locally or imported from other countries. That means it's an output. So mostly we can see like if you import things and if the trade deficit is created due to this importation of maybe let's say like inputs for production and machinery and all these things, okay, quite fine. Like we can't say it's wrong or you have to stop it. No, but just think sometimes the consumption goods, we import more these consumption goods. So why can't we avoid these kind of things? So this is what I think that is the open economic policy is given to us, like the dependence culture. We try to be dependent, like, okay, sometimes that mentality is also there. Just see that, okay, when you go to the market, sometimes there might be two products, right? Two products. One is imported one and the other one is a local one. So sometimes the imported product is high priced. So why? When you ask why, it is imported. That mentality we have. It's an important thing. But you underestimate the local thing. I'm referring to this consumption part. So therefore, I think we need to revisit again our import structure. We need to revisit our import structure and carefully analyze again. And we need to substitute where it is applicable. We need to go by that thing. That is really important. And that will solve many problems, many financial issues. Maybe the debt, earlier we discussed the debt problem, the currency issues. So you can have solutions. I'm not saying again, you can't have all these things at once in the short term, but in the long run, if you go step by step in this movement, you will win.
That's very true, sir. So last but not least, the final question for the day is, with the pandemic hitting Europe and America hard, so do you see any opportunities lying ahead to Sri Lanka to expand its exports and strengthen international trade?
Again, kindly, this is another issue that I think I touched to a certain extent in the earlier questions. Like I said earlier, USA and Europe are the most affected economies in the world at the moment. And these are giants, right? Giant economies in the world. And also we know one thing, that is our main export destinations, two main export destinations. But again, like I said earlier, again, they are also having some kind of defending strategies at the moment, because the impact on their economy is really high. I think I highlighted some of the points earlier. The other thing is another issue, why this impact of this pandemic is quite high in these developed countries is because of their market-oriented political economy. Because there are more liberalized economic systems they have, in particular USA is the #1 liberalized economy. So therefore, the government intervention is quite low in these kind of economies. But relatively, we have much higher government intervention in Sri Lanka. So that is why actually the government is involving in these kind of activities and to try to manage it. So since these countries are driven by the market mechanism mostly, their impact is really high, and their output, if you just look at the recent statistics again, huge impact is there to their output growth and the unemployment and inflation and all this stuff. So this is what actually we experienced in the 2007 crisis. Again, if you look at the statistics of after the 2007-8 crisis, global financial crisis, the most affected countries were those US and European countries, or developed countries. But least affected countries are the developing countries and emerging nations. So therefore, because like I said, there are many reasons, right? There are many reasons for that thing because of US and Europe are highly interdependent. These two are like Europe and US are the main trading and investment partners. So therefore, that is why that 2007 crisis hit these two countries like severely. But it was quite less because of this. The relationship is quite distant with these countries. That is why the developing countries did quite well, emerging countries, importantly, did quite well. While they were experiencing negative economic growth, emerging Asian economies, importantly China and India, they experienced positive economic growth. So therefore, now even in this situation, they are the most affected than this developing country. That is why sometimes we can't keep hope, that much hope on these economies. But one thing, that doesn't mean that they will close their economies to our countries like for our exports. No, they will not do that. They will keep moving with the same strategies because mainly they capitalize on these getting things done from other nations where the economic efficiency is there. Now we know that in the globalized context, these developed countries and the multinationals in these countries have globalized their value chain activities into different part of the world. So we are also providing some kind of like adding some values to these global products. I think this is the point. This is one point. We can't say that okay, we can have more opportunities. There are more exports in the future in these countries. We can't expect that thing, but those kind of value chain activities will be there. So what you need to do here is getting these kind of value chain activities. That is really important, these value chain activities. But again, you have to be very careful. Why? Due to this vulnerability, I'm referring to Sri Lankan economy, right? Due to this vulnerability, sometimes the bargaining power of these value chain activities are to these, let's say, parent country or the parent company. We don't get it. Sometimes what we add to these products is a very little value. It's sometimes quite negligible. Sometimes we add a value, but the return would be quite small. So therefore, I think what we can do in the future is attracting these kind of value chain activities, global value chain activities, where we can add more value, where we can retain more value, we can add value and retain more things within the country. For that, I think we need to attract more skills-driven and more technology-driven value chain activities, rather than kind of labor-driven or like primary level materials-driven value chain activities. I think that is a best strategy or good opportunity that we have in the future. But I don't think, as per my understanding, there won't be new opportunities opened in the near future in these countries, because still the economic outcomes or economic impact still we are experiencing. So therefore, we can keep hopes, but rather I would say better to capitalize on the internal value addition and internal or inward-oriented activities rather than depending on these other countries.
Those were some great insights, sir. So that brings us to the end of today's session. It was a great pleasure, Dr. Sajitha, to have you with us here today, for investing your valuable time and sharing your insights with us, which is very useful for our young and upcoming leaders. So once again, on behalf of FMF Media and from Team Satahana, big thank you for gracing this event, sir. So just like all good things have to come to an end, I think now is the time. So I'm sure each one of you would have encountered something useful. If you do, thank you for being here with us. It's truly an honor. So stay tuned while we bring you the 6th episode of Satahana very shortly. Hope you all have a great day. Stay blessed and stay safe. Thank you.